Hi there, I'm Darren McDermott and you're watching Dukascopy TV. Now, the US airline industry continues to outperform a turbulent market this year. I'm joined today by Eric Kohn. Welcome.
Thank you.
So what have been the driving factors for successful profits from Delta and Boeing, which have actually beat expectations from Wall Street?
Well, I think the American airline industry has gone over a renaissance. The ability to go Chapter 11, reorganize and shed some of the costs that you have and rationalize by mergers has certainly been a driving element in the results. Clearly, the economy is picking up a bit more, but the efficiencies that have been gained by American coming out of Chapter 11 and the merger with US Airlines is significant. Otherwise, I think, you know, in the United States, one of the advantages is the railroad system isn't very good, and you either drive or you fly.
And how are European airlines doing in comparison?
Very different. The European market is clearly unified under the EU, but distances between capital cities are very different. There isn't a coast-to-coast 5-hour flight. If you go across Europe, perhaps if you go from Europe to Moscow, it's a 3.5-hour flight. So it's a different sort of market, and the other fundamental difference is we have a train system in Europe that is very efficient. We're sitting here in Geneva. Most people, if they have to go to the center of Paris, would take the train. They take the train if they're going to Milan. So the railroad is a real competitor to, if it exists, to the short-haul flight. The other problem is it's very difficult in Europe to get the economics right. It's quite a challenge because in America they have no air traffic control charges, and the airport charges are fairly low compared to those of Europe, and they don't have the type of taxes that we have on airline tickets. So the cost structure is much higher in Europe. But there are a lot of places in Europe that you have to travel by air. If you want to go to London, the train would take a bit long from Geneva. And so the airlines have done relatively well, providing they've got control of their costs and they've understood the change in selling that's happened. And I think it's fundamental both to the United States and to Europe that selling for airlines is no longer the traditional go to a travel agent, go to a travel shop, go to the airline. It's almost like the supermarkets and the retail stores. You can either go online or you go into the shop and have a look, and then you go back online and book it online. So it's really, selling of airline tickets has changed considerably in the last 3 or 4 years, and it's IT driven. And therefore, people who come out of very competitive markets, understand IT, do very well as CEO or chief commercial officers of airlines now.
Okay, Eric, and you've been working on 2 acquisitions recently of airlines, so can you tell us a little bit about these projects?
Well, we bought for Intro Aviation GmbH, a German company that's turned around several airlines in Germany. One of them being Deutsche BA, which they bought from British Airways, making huge losses, and turned around within 12 months. They also bought LTU and turned it around. They both ended up in Air Berlin. Mm-hmm. And we have just acquired for Intro in Ireland an airline called CityJet, which specializes in taking passengers from Dublin to London City, which is not a very well-known airport, and then flying them out of the City of London to various other destinations, and that's their major activity. We bought the airline from Air France. Air France was having difficulty with the airline. It was making losses, and our clients believe it can turn it around because it doesn't really fit into the Air France network, and it will also continue operating for Air France on some contracts where they supply the aircraft and the crews. And we also bought another airline in Belgium called VLM, which used to be very, very successful. It was bought by Air France. They shut down the sales and marketing, and it was integrated and then moved into loss. And it will now be an independent Belgium airline supplying regional aircraft, Fokker 50s, to other airlines for use on short routes.
Okay, and you mentioned Ireland a couple of minutes ago. Now, Michael O'Leary, CEO of Ryanair, has decided to have a big revamp, a new advertising campaign for Ryanair. Now, do you think it's actually going to be successful?
It could be. Michael O'Leary is a very good businessman. He's got a different clientele to that of EasyJet. EasyJet has understood how to beat the classic airlines and also expand the market beyond the business traveller and the leisure traveller to new travellers. And they've done it by opening up airports like Southend and flying, for instance, to Geneva. But the real thing that EasyJet has understood is how to give service. They now allow you to allocate a seat, have an allocated seat. If you're only a member of the EasyJet club, you can get the front row. And it's moved into being a business airline as well as being a leisure airline. Now, Ryanair has really concentrated on taking people to leisure or secondary airports to a greater deal. It hasn't really offered any service. It's been cheap and cheerful, providing you don't buy the extras, and that's what makes him the money. And I think trying to enhance his business model with service probably will work if he does it right. Someone in the industry said, well, he's been taking hormones. Perhaps they'll work.
Eric, looking at the Malaysian Airlines story, now over the last 3 years, it's ran up huge losses of around 1.3 billion. And of course, this latest disappearance is not helping. It's been put under huge scrutiny. So could this actually push the company out of business?
There are certain airlines that are owned by governments or quasi-governments that are very, very successful, and there are others that aren't. That really comes from the management. There is a very large European airline that's had losses of $1 billion. I think the losses that they've run up has to be a result of bad management, because Malaysia is geographically in a very good position, and Singapore Airlines has done extremely well. But losing an aircraft like this is devastating, because normally if an aircraft gets lost, they find the reason, they know what's happened, etc. Although I have to say the Air France Airbus that got lost in the Atlantic, it took a long time to find. I think the uncertainty is probably a deterrent to the Chinese customers, who probably think had they travelled on a Chinese airline, it might not have happened. But the aircraft, the Boeing 777, has got a superb record, and I think we have to wait to see what the cause is. And clearly, any aircraft accident has an effect. But I think the issue with Malaysian Airlines is not just the accident.
Eric, thank you very much.
It's a pleasure. Look forward to seeing you next time.
Well, what a great topic, and we definitely will be having Eric back in the studio very soon. Now do stay tuned to Dukascopy TV for more interviews. See you soon.